Well, good morning, everyone. We are back now, and for Week 15, as we look at Week 15 news and notes, waiver wire playoffs. Today, I sit there once again with Jimmy over in Phoenix, as well as Jed over in Chicago. So, welcome everyone.
Good morning. Playoffs have started for
Yeah, hopefully everyone is tuning in because they made the playoffs. Unlike me, because Tommy knocked me out of our league. That stinks.
I'm telling you, I was sitting there watching, and look, Jed, I was very surprised because I thought we're separating two divisions. So I thought it was the top three in each division. Lo and behold, I wake up this morning and say, how in the world did I get in the playoffs?
Yeah, I was disappointed. I was telling you guys I had Kyler Murray going in last night in a slight lead, but the opponent had James Conner, and the second James Conner touchdown and then Kyler Murray's second interception, those things just killed me. So first time in our league, I didn't make the playoffs, but I'll be watching you. Tommy's going in as the 6th seed, and he could make a little run here, so we'll see.
James Conner, I would say, really helped a lot of people win their league this year or get into the playoffs, because that guy, what does he hit at, like 16 or 17 touchdowns? Yeah. You know, for somebody who they just signed to a 1-year deal, he's getting a big contract next year. I'll say that.
Oh, yeah. And if you look at his draft position, he was probably drafted more like in the 3rd, 4th, even 5th rounds. And so he paid out at a 1st-round response. So that was definitely, you know, it's always fun to look back. Usually there's 1 or 2 or 3 players that are consistent across all the championship teams. I wouldn't be surprised if Connor is one of those guys.
Well, I'll tell you this, like the 2 people who looked so good yesterday, Cooper Kupp, who is the #1 wide receiver. You can tell Matthew Stafford's always looking for Cooper Kupp, especially when he's like 3rd and whatever, he's always going, and James Conner. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins had that big drop in the 4th quarter, but AJ Green did pretty decent, but Conner's look good.
If you look at the stats, James Conner's had 13 rushes, 31 yards, but he also had 9 catches, 94 yards. On the other hand, AJ Green had 7 catches, 102 yards. The problem with that is Kyler Murray threw 2 interceptions and no touchdowns at all.
Yeah, and I was going to say, the weird thing, again, going into your playoffs, you guys should be paying attention to matchups, but you have to also look at trends. So the Cardinals have played not as well at home as they have on the road. And so if I had to follow that closely, I would have considered playing Burrows over Kyler Murray because he was playing at home.
Yeah.
So and playing the Rams, who the Rams are obviously a really good defense.
But Chad, what's your advice for me where I got into the playoffs, but I can't make moves?
Yeah, your advice is just put whoever is a warm body. You're like the Chicago Bulls. You have, COVID, and you're just throwing in whoever can play.
Hey, look, I'm stuck with Philip Lindsay. All right, I'm stuck. He's on my roster.
Yeah. But remember, the Chicago Bulls canceled 2 games, so they can't play anymore because of COVID.
Yeah, that was crazy. It's interesting how that impacts our fantasy league too, because
Well, look at Jalen Ramsey. He was just knocked out with COVID, tested positive 5 hours before the game. So a lot of times you're sitting there watching. You think that these guys are playing, but you got to monitor it.
Well, I thought the Cardinals receivers were going to go nuts because they were down to the Rams were down to their 3rd string cornerback. But what ended up happening was they got so much pressure from the line that it made up for the corners. And so then the defense still dominated.
Did you notice Aaron Donald had 3 sacks? Man, he was so good.
Oh, did you guys hear the other stat too? So I don't know if you saw at the end of the game, the Cardinals tried to make a comeback, got a field goal, and then they recovered an onside kick. But I don't know if you heard the stat. In the first 14 weeks of the NFL season, there were 4 recovered onside kicks. And then this past weekend, there were 4 recovered onside kicks. So that was crazy.
Well, okay, so here's the other thing, and then we need to kind of go into the fantasy, but that's Kingsbury and Murray did not handle that last minute well. Because I was like, okay, so the last play of the game, what he should have done is gone up to the line and just spiked the ball and stopped the clock, right? Why he decided to try to create a play and then got sacked is beyond me. So he should have given himself some time to just throw that deep ball and give them a chance to win.
Well, the mistake was even before then. I mean, the commentators were talking about it, that they should have took the field goal when they had about a minute left.
That's true. Instead of going for 4 downs.
Yeah, if they had about a minute left, they should have taken the field goal then and then gone for the onside kick, because you have to leave yourself time. So anyway, but it's all hindsight. I mean, it was a fun game. The reality is they didn't deserve to win. The Rams deserved to win.
It was so funny. It always brings back its memory. I was at this event. Do you remember the Super Bowl a number of years ago where it was Atlanta Falcons versus the New England Patriots, and Falcons almost won, right?
Yeah.
And it just happened that one of the events was a conference, and I was sitting next to one of the owners of the Atlanta Falcons, and he had a card that says owner of the Atlanta Falcons. And he was saying he was so mad at what's his name, Shanahan, at that point, because he was the offensive coordinator. Yeah. He says the problem with these young offensive coordinators, they try to be too cute, like Kingsbury. They try to think that they're geniuses, and they do things that are outside the box when all they need to do is just kick the field goal. And so that's the thing is, I think with Kingsbury is he's trying to be too cute instead of kicking the field goal and going for the win.
By the way, LA Rams, Matthew Stafford, 287 yards, 3 touchdowns. Cooper Kupp, 120 yards, but Odell Beckham, 77 yards, 1 touchdown. And Von Jefferson, 58 yards, 1 touchdown. The receivers are doing really, really well.
Oh, Odell Beckham has had a touchdown in every game he's played for them. So, that's pretty good. I mean, I think you could see he really added to that offense. And really Stafford, it was good to see Stafford have a game when he needed to have a good game, because he's been a little bit up and down. If you look at the last 3-4 weeks, he hasn't been playing that well. So this was it's really setting up for a nice playoffs for the NFL. It's going to be exciting to see.
Yeah. And with Henderson out with COVID, you have Sony Michelle, 79 yards. Sony Michelle is a great fill-in. You look at all of these backup running backs that we always talk about, Madison and Pollard, but Sony Michelle is really good coming from New England.
Yeah, hopefully you picked him up 2 weeks ago, because last week he had the over 100 and a touchdown.
Yeah,
this week really, this week actually he had a solid game. It's just he didn't get the touchdown. But Darrell Henderson will be back. But I would guess that Sony Michelle has carved out a little bit more carries than he would have had otherwise. But it should be back to a timeshare this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Speaking of news and notes, a lot of times is I want to talk and get it over with. Chicago Bears loses to the Green Bay Packers 30-45. I was sitting on the plane going home from LA, and first half, everything was good. I said, wow, they're playing a very good game. I get home from the airport, turned on the TV. I said, what in the world? How they score 45 points? Aaron Rodgers, who says that his toe feels worse after Sunday night's game, he definitely had a setback. It sure wasn't showing any setbacks with his little pinky.
Yeah, that first half was so exciting. But even in the first half, there were the mistakes. Like there was the interception. So there were still mistakes in the first half, but things were set up for the Bears to win. They just couldn't pull it off. But, it's interesting. I don't know if you guys have been listening. It sounds like Nagy might make it, and he might not be fired, and they might get rid of the GM is what I was hearing.
Oh, really?
They might just flip the GM and still keep Nagy, which is interesting. But I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I think the thing that you're hearing across the board, right, especially in Jacksonville and Chicago, the question is you've got the centerpiece in Trevor Lawrence as well as Justin Fields, and how do you develop them? Because at the core of it, whoever the head coach is has to be able to develop that quarterback. And right now, even in Jacksonville, Urban Meyer is not developing it. I can see Meyer leaving actually here after this year.
Oh, I cannot imagine that Meyer will make it. I mean, he's been a disaster. I mean, not only the record, but if you read about the reports, it sounds like the guy's just a jerk and like everyone doesn't like working for him. So, I can't imagine that he'll make it. But Nagy, I don't know. Everyone says Nagy is supposed to be a good guy. And I think to your point, if they think that he can continue to develop Fields, which he has that history with quarterbacks, then, maybe they'll still keep him, but we'll see.
Speaking of Bears, how good was that Jakeem Grant?
Oh yeah, that run back, that was so exciting. Yeah, but not only that, if you watch the game, his speed just jumps out. Remind me of Devin Hester, where you could just see the speed, and same thing. He's just got the wheels.
He's able to have the speed and then go to the sidelines and go straight up that sideline pretty well.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is something that we could talk about later on, even with waiver wire pickups, with the championships and the playoffs coming up this week. I think you're going to have to start playing players like Grant who you might not have wanted to play in the past, right? So for me, a Grant would be a great flex option versus a Cortland Sutton. Like people who is going to score. And I think as you're looking at this last half of the playoffs and last half of the season, you're going to have to play some people that you would not have played earlier in the season.
Yeah, like for instance.
Oh, go ahead.
Wouldn't you say a lot of times, going back what Jimmy says, for instance, Allen Robinson no longer is part of your conversation. Darnell Mooney is no longer part of your conversation.
Well, see, I would disagree on Mooney, but on Allen Robinson, yes. So I think to Jimmy's point, let's say you have a player where you have like a 50% certainty that they will score 10 points, but you also know that they can't score 20 points. Whereas you have someone else who maybe has a 20% chance of scoring 20 points, but also maybe a 50% chance of scoring less than 10 points. It's like you're taking high risk, high reward. But I would put Mooney in that category because I feel like Mooney, he's such a long bomb threat. All he needs is one of those catches, for a touchdown, and all of a sudden his day is like over 100 yards and a touchdown. Yeah. So I think those are the kind of, it's like the home run hitters. Like those are the kind of guys you want to play in your flex spots.
Like a great option would be a KJ Osborne, the receiver for Minnesota Vikings. I mean, he's had consistent double figures in the last couple of weeks, and he's somebody who I would have never looked at, to be honest, in the past. But because I'm in this, you either win or you're out, I'm going to play an Osborne because he's going to get me at double figures.
Yeah, or like Van Jefferson on the Rams, right? Like he's not the main guy, but if it's a high scoring game and you just happen to pick up you get a little bit of lightning in a bottle, and all of a sudden he scores 1 or 2 touchdowns.
Totally.
Hey, on the Green Bay Packers side, AJ Dillon, 15 carries, 71 yards. Aaron Jones, 5 carries, 36 yards. Is this the beginning of the end for Aaron Jones as we know it?
I don't think so. I think if you watch the game, they said he's still hobbled by his injury, right? And they're going to take it slowly because they know that the Packers are most likely going to go deep in the playoffs and they're going to need Jones, right? So they're going to use Dillon as much as they can. My only fear sometimes is they'll always use Dillon, but at the end of the day, Jones is going to get the touchdown.
Yeah, I was going to say, which is what happened. He scored. And then also the key with Jones is receiving out of the backfield. Like Dillon is the harder runner and definitely more potential for the goal line carries. But Jones, his receiving ability, basically you're in a timeshare situation. I actually have a team that I have both of them and I played both and it was fine. It worked out fine because they got enough points.
Yeah.
I always hear the commentators talk about AJ Dillon's calf and how big his calf is.
Yeah, when he moves, like when he hits the pile, I always look at that. Like when they hit the pile, does the pile move? And like he can move the pile like when he goes into the middle.
Yeah. I still go back to that draft. If they didn't draft Jordan Love, they could have had Justin Jefferson and AJ Dillon. Can you imagine that offense with those two?
Oh, Justin Jefferson too, man. Talk about taking over for the Vikings. The second half of the season for Justin Jefferson has been great.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, he's better. I mean, just look at the numbers, right? He's better than some of these other players. Calvin Ridley didn't do anything this year. He's better than CD Lamb, He's actually been I would say he's in the top 5 wide receivers if you're looking next year.
No, definitely. The other person I thought who we knew was going to be good, but I thought has been even more of a focal point has been Chris Godwin.
Oh, yeah.
Chris Godwin has been unbelievable because not only is he getting the yards, but it's the number of catches. He's consistently getting like 10 plus catches a game, which is just, phenomenal. Especially if you're in a PPR league, that guy has been phenomenal.
Yeah. You mentioned Justin Jefferson, and we didn't even talk on Friday in regards to Pittsburgh-Minnesota game. Hey, look, Pittsburgh Steelers loses to Minnesota Vikings 36-28. It doesn't even feel like it was that close. But as much as we talk about Justin Jefferson, 7 catches, 79 yards, Dalvin Cook, who had a great game, 27 carries, 205 yards. But going back to Jimmy's point, KJ Osborne, 83 yards, 1 touchdown in place of Adam Thielen. Look, if Adam Thielen is out again, you're definitely playing KJ Osborne.
Oh, yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The other thing I mentioned, Dalvin Cook coming back after just 1 week missing with that shoulder injury and then playing. I think it was just 1 week, right? Maybe 2 weeks. Yeah, just 1 week. And then he wore that shoulder harness. So again, I do think you have to look at the durability of players and players willing to play through injuries. And Dalvin Cook has that, he has that history where he's going to try to play. So.
Speaking of that, Jed, you are on your way to a championship in our keeper league. You're not. I mean, if Derrick Henry was going to have an all-star of all-star seasons, and he was on his way to doing that.
Yeah, well, Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook. I mean, that's a crazy backfield. So,
and also Kyler Murray was out for 3 or 4 games for you as well too. So you had your top 2 running backs and your quarterback out.
Yeah, but in hindsight, I didn't manage. I was just basically waiting for those guys back, and I probably should have made some more bigger moves, to just assume that they wouldn't be back. So it was tough, but what can you do? That's why I love that fantasy is just like real life, in that if your star players go down, it's very difficult to win.
Yeah. Hey, look, I'm dealing with it in basketball, not football right now. One of my teams, I have an all-star team, but I have a newbie out, I have Jeremy Grant out, I have Klay Thompson out, I have John Morant out. I mean, everyone's out.
Yeah, injuries, I think, have become managing injuries is a big part of fantasy. That's for sure.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about the Baltimore game, Cleveland Browns game. Look, Browns won 24-22, and Baker Mayfield is terrible. I mean, the one thing that I was watching at Get Up, they said, look, Baker Mayfield is average, but they have an all-star defense for the Cleveland Browns, and they have a great running back, but Baker Mayfield is the one that's going to hold them back. With that said, on Baltimore, Lamar Jackson suffers a sprained ankle, and also he's going to get an MRI to determine the severity of it, but he was taken to the locker room early on in the second quarter. But other than that, I mean, if Lamar Jackson is out, it does not look good for the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I think they already came out and said that Lamar Jackson, it was not a high ankle sprain, which is a good sign, because then you would expect that, he shouldn't miss much time. Hopefully can I don't know if there's reports of him even being able to play this week, but yeah, I mean, obviously Lamar Jackson's a huge part of your team if you've got him. And if he can play, it'll make a big difference. The other person I want to mention though is Mark Andrews. Again, another guy that first half of the season was really struggling. Second half of the season has really turned it on. He had over 100 yards and a touchdown. So another solid player.
But Jed, did you see Rashad Bateman? 7 catches, 103 yards.
Yeah, Jimmy was talking about Bateman all season. And so if you picked him up, he's definitely paying off for you now.
There's a couple of receivers that quite honestly are starting to emerge right now. I mean, it's also the end of the year. A Bateman, Amora St. Brown with Detroit has started kind of peeking his head. And there's a couple of people from a dynasty perspective that I've been picking up in a couple of my leagues where I was like, oh, if I keep them, they actually might do pretty decently well.
You know who I really like is Michael Gallup in Dallas. Every game I watch him, he has such great hands. I feel like any ball thrown his way, he catches it. And so he's a guy that, even though there's so many wide receivers in Dallas, he's a guy I like.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking in terms of Dallas, a lot of times, even though they won 27-20 against the Washington football team, it doesn't look like Dak Prescott is right or back to its all-star level before the ankle injury. Is that how you guys are seeing it as well too?
In that one league, I don't know if you're going to keep on playing Dak Prescott, but you could potentially win if he does well, but he's been so inconsistent right now, right? Like, you can even look at the numbers from CD Lamb. You can look at the numbers for Cooper. Only Gallup, honestly, going back to what you said, Jed, is the most consistent player. I do think when Tony Pollard is in, though, they are a much better offense than if Zeke is in there. So that's just all I've seen.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The big thing to follow is whether or not Pollard is going to play. If Pollard is able to play, I do think it helps Dak. But I do think if you have Dak, you have to consider, do you sit him for some other options? Because he's been in the 200-yard category. He has not been over 300 yards. And you're right. I don't think he's totally healthy yet. He just doesn't look quite the same.
Yeah.
November 25th against the LA Raiders. This was during Thanksgiving. He had 375 yards. But the 2 games after that, it was 211, 230. The one game before that was 219 yards. And I've realized with all my teams, I have Dak Prescott on most of my quarterbacks. I'm struggling because when he struggles, I just definitely lose. All my other players are very consistent. Dak Prescott is the one that I struggle with.
Okay, Tom, going back to our league, right? Like the league you and I are playing in. So you've got Dak Prescott, who's got pretty inconsistent, right? You got Justin Fields, who almost scored 30 fantasy points. You've got Taysom Hill, who've almost scored 30 fantasy points in the last 2 games. You got Garoppolo, who's got almost 25 fantasy points. Would you ever replace a Dak Prescott with one of those 3 for the playoffs?
Well, it really depends on who. I would probably have to look to see who Dallas is playing this week and see what that defense looks like too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because if they're playing the Jets or Houston Texans, I definitely am playing Dak Prescott.
Yeah,
I think the Texans are playing the Jags, and I think the Jets are playing, I want to say, Seattle.
Okay, got it. Hey, speaking of that, as Jimmy is looking, Jed, the Washington football team. Look, we need a new quarterback, all right? Because McLaren, went out with a concussion, but he has not been doing well. And Antonio Gibson has been doing well the last couple of weeks, but with them being down, they moved away from the run. I still like his hopes. The very fact that J.D. McKissick is out helps Antonio Gibson, but he only had 10 carries and 36 yards. It was annoying.
Yeah, I was going to say Gibson has started to turn things around a little bit. He's just being held back by the offense. So for me, I think it's totally matchup dependent. If the Redskins are playing a defense, I shouldn't call them the Washington team. If they're playing a team who is not a strong defense against the rush, then I think you can play Gibson. If not, though, if they're playing a strong team, I'd consider sitting him.
Yeah.
Got it. Jim, Seattle, we usually won't talk anything about a team playing against the Houston Texans, but here's the player I want to talk with. Seattle Seahawks wins 33-13 against the Houston Texans. Talk to me about Rashad Penny, 16 carries, 137 yards. Compare that to Collins at 7 carries. And look, Adrian Peterson didn't even play. Rashad Penny, is he going to be a hot player that you're looking in? Or
he's at the top of everybody. He's at the top of everybody's waiver wire. Like, he came out of nowhere. I think we always knew Penny was decent, but he's always injured. And so he came out to waiver wires. And I know going into Sunday's game, a lot of people still didn't pick him up. And he's just kind of sitting there because Alex Collins was still the number 1 receiver. But to be honest, like, if you looked at the Seattle game, Metcalf didn't do anything. Russell Wilson was inconsistent. Rashad Penny was the best offensive player out there, and he's the reason why they end up winning that game.
Yeah, I would say, and this is actually one of my tactics I like doing, is right before on Sunday, you pick up the backups like Rashad Penny, but you just stick them on your bench. So they're not in your starting lineup, but they're on your bench. And then if they hit, then you end up, it's kind of like a little bit of a lottery ticket. So it actually worked for me for both Penny and Sony Michelle. I got both that way. But what I was going to say is, in that Seattle game, I think this was a turnaround game for Russell Wilson. I felt like Russell Wilson finally was hitting Tyler Lockett with those long bombs. Lockett had over 100 yards. So if I have Russell Wilson, and you guys know I stole Russell Wilson in one league as a player, I don't know, someone who dropped him. If I had made the playoffs, this is the week I would still play him because I think he's turning things around, and you can get some good points out of him.
Yeah, Metcalf didn't do anything in that game. He scored, I don't even know how much, but like single-digit fantasy points.
Yeah. But the deep ball definitely was there. Hey, Jed, also another team that we probably usually don't want to talk about is Jacksonville Jaguars. They lose to Tennessee Titans 20-0. But the players that I want to talk to you about is James Robinson. With playoffs starting, he only has 6 carries, 4 yards. And also the 2 Tennessee Titans, Devontae Freeman as well as Hilliard. Talk to me about those 3 running backs.
Yeah, James Robinson, that killed me. I was really disappointed in that output. I think James Robinson is a great player. It's just matchup dependent. You got to be really careful. But here's the thing: the Jacksonville Jaguars are playing Houston, and so to me, I'm playing James Robinson next week. I'm expecting him to have big output. Same thing with even on the Houston team. I think you can find points there. So for me, even though he had such a bad week, I'd still play him.
Yeah, I get that, right? Because he's slated to get 14, 15 fantasy points. You don't know what Urban Meyer is thinking, right? So that's the problem is, on paper, it looks like he's going to have a great game against Houston. No one knows what Urban Meyer's up to these days. Even Trevor Lawrence came out this week and said, we should play James Robinson. And you know what? James Robinson had 6 yards. And so I just think that Urban Meyer's. You don't know where he's at.
You know what I was thinking? Here's a question for you guys. Would you pick up Travis Etienne and stash him in your keeper leagues?
I would seriously consider. I mean, I'm not going to because I've got other players I want to keep. But here's my thing, right? I think that Urban Meyer is going to be gone. I think they're going to bring in one of these hot young assistants who's going to know how to use the ETN. And the best, let's say you keep ETN, he's going to do what Kareem Hunt's going to do. If you can get a Kareem Hunt out of ETN, I actually think that's worth. I mean, if you need some running backs, he's worth it.
Hey, look, Charlene is my wife who has ETN in the keeper league, and I've been trying to figure out should she just keep her versus. Yeah, so I think ETN definitely is someone to consider keeping.
I like ETN. I think he has lots of potential.
Yeah. Jim, what do you think about Foreman as well as Hilliard? I thought Hilliard was going to do well. He was so disappointing with only 6 carries and 13 yards.
Yeah, so Foreman was actually the better running back if you watch the game. So he played the majority of the game. The only hesitation I have about Foreman is you never know if Hilliard is going to come in because there was a stretch where all they did was play Hilliard, right? And so I don't know if he just needed some rest or what it was, but clearly Foreman's going to be the number one back, and clearly Hilliard is going to be the second back, but you don't know if it's going to turn out to be a timeshare. But if you need a running back this week, I would say Foreman's the person that you want to play.
Got it. Hey, Jed, Broncos against Detroit Lions 38-10. With DeAndre Swift out this week and possibly out next week, the one that did pretty well was Craig Reynolds. No name Craig Reynolds that was not on anyone's radar. 11 carries, 83 yards. You also have St. Brown, who caught 8 catches, 73 yards. With nobody playing in Detroit, how likely are you going to start those guys in your flex this week?
Yeah, no, in Detroit, unfortunately, TJ Hawkinson was out, and it looks like he may be out again. Actually, that's a major hit for me and a lot of people this week. So, yeah, and then basically, I don't know that you know what? I guess I would say this: Detroit, somebody's gonna have to get the offensive points. With Swift out, with Hawkinson out, someone's gonna have to score. And to our discussion earlier about sometimes you got to swing for the fences. Maybe that's what you do, for your flex position. You look to Detroit, who's going to be the starting wide receiver, who's going to be a starting running back there, and pick up, and try to get those points. I don't think that's a horrible move.
Yeah. My frustration is I had Jamar Jefferson, the backup running back for Detroit, and I actually thought that he was going to have a good game, but at the last minute, they decided not to play him.
Yeah. Jim, on the other hand, with the Denver Broncos, look at Melvin Gordon, who was out last week. We thought this was now Javonte Williams was now going to start all the time, but he came out with 24 carries, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Javonte Williams did pretty good, 15 carries, 73 yards, and he also had a touchdown for a catch as well too. But it looks like it's going to be a timeshare if Melvin Gordon is healthy.
Mm-hmm. I still think that you play Javonte Williams every week. I think he's got the potential. I mean, to do pretty well. I'm looking at how much he scored. He scored what, 20? I mean, think about it. Look at the last couple of weeks, right? 20 fantasy points, 27 fantasy points, 18 fantasy points. He's a consistent guy. He's going to get you at least 15 to 20 points. And so I don't have any worries. I still think if anything happens to Melvin Gordon next week or in the weeks to come, you always what do you call it? Williams seems like he's a workhorse. He's gonna get you the points.
Yeah, Jed, a couple more questions I want to talk to you about, or a couple more games. San Francisco against the Cincinnati Bengals. They win 26-23. I would love to hear your thoughts on Jeff Wilson in light of the fact 13 carries, 50 yards, and then also with the Cincinnati Bengals. With the San Francisco 49ers. George Kittles has been doing so well since he came back from injury.
So he's the only tight end who's even doing remotely well out there right now. It's not Kelsey, it's not Waller, it's Kittles, right? Kittles has been phenomenal the last 2 games.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to say this back half of the season, Kittle has really, but he was hurt a little bit earlier on, but he really solidified his position in the top 3. He's been dominating the games. If you look at that, that combination of Kittles together with Deebo Samuels, and then I think Ayuk was out last week, but came back and had a touchdown this week too. It's just been a nice combination for them. And so if you have Kittle, definitely he's he's scoring points for you.
Mhm.
I was a little disappointed in Cincinnati. Actually, I thought Cincinnati was going to win this game. Joe Burrow had a decent game, so had over 300 yards, but was a little disappointed in the run game, especially. I thought the running game for Cincinnati is really where they lost it.
See, I was fine with Cincinnati because Jamar Chase came back alive and scored 2 touchdowns. And so I was like, for a guy who didn't have anything from Jamar Chase the last few weeks, I was happy with Jamar Chase.
Yeah, no, you're right. Jamar Chase definitely paid. I just meant as a team. I was Cincinnati is a team that you remember at one point they were leading their division. It felt like they had turned the corner, but really they lost games that they should win, and this is a game they should have won.
And also T. Higgins, he started out slow, but boy, is he hot in the last 3 games, 114 yards, 138 yards, 114 yards. He's been doing really, really well.
Yeah. Well, for that AFC North, right, they got Baltimore, they've got Cincinnati,
Cleveland,
right? No one knows. I mean, if Lamar Jackson is out, I mean, I think Cleveland might actually be the best team in terms of winning that division unless Cincinnati takes them. But right now, I think it's Cleveland's to lose in terms of the division.
Yeah. Jim, as we look at waiver wire pickups, especially in light of playoffs, is Rashad Penny your number 1 waiver wire pickup this week?
Yeah, I think he's out there. I'm looking at some of them. I think he's you're gambling on the fact that he's going to have another consistent running game. But Seattle is best when they have a good, consistent running game. And so I would say, look, if Rashad Penny's out there, go for Rashad Penny. The other people that KJ Osborne, I think we talked a little bit about him in terms of being out there. Michael Carter comes back from the IR this week, so I think that's somebody to monitor. Supposedly, Calvin Ridley can come off the IR if they end up taking him. I doubt he's going to end up playing. There's been some speculation, if you read the Atlanta news, that he might not play at all anymore, just because of all the mental stuff that he's going through. But those are a couple of folks that I would really look at. Amar St. Brown, I really like him for Detroit. I think he's a good wide receiver pickup. And then the other person I think to pay attention to, Kareem Hunt got injured for the Browns this week. Dearness Johnson may be a good pickup for you to take a look at as well too.
Yeah. Hey, honestly, I think a lot of times if Calvin Ridley does come back, Jed, I mean, would you disagree? You probably wouldn't even be playing him at all. I don't even think that with the lack of conditioning or anything like that with playoff time, you're not even considering him.
No, I'm not. And Cordell Patterson, again, still is the main guy I'd be looking at there. Yeah. Although I will say, Jimmy, there was a Mike Davis sighting, so he came back a little bit, had some points.
Mike Davis had 14 touches this week. Who knew?
Yes. So if you're desperate, Davis is someone you could maybe consider.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of that, do you think it's the end of Matt Ryan in Atlanta?
I don't. I mean, they're 6-7. They're in the playoff hunt, right? Let's just say that they kept Calvin Ridley. I mean, they've got good pieces around them. There can be an argument made that because they were surprised by the Calvin Ridley being out this year, and they could have been a lot better. But they're technically still in the playoff hunt, and he's still pretty consistent. I mean, I think at some point he's going to be a Ben Roethlisberger, where he'll be like, okay, it's done. So I could see that happening to Matt Ryan.
Yeah. Hey, and it's looking more and more like, especially if they play Trey Lance, that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be a decent quarterback as long as he stays healthy on another team. He looks like he's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not a Jimmy G fan. I don't. He's too inconsistent for me. To me, he reminds me of a Derek Carr. It's just like very up and down. He'll have some great games, but then he'll have some games where he loses it for you. So I feel like he's still in that second tier. He's not in the first tier quarterbacks.
Yeah. Well, hey, Luck. This week, it looks like with Jimmy traveling, we may just be recording again this 1 week. Sorry about that, if in terms of sound and all that stuff. As we wrap up, any news, NBA, crypto, anything like that you guys have on your head?
Crypto's getting hammered. Well, the stock market and crypto, everything is getting hammered. But I would still buy in. I mean, for me, I was so tempted. So I told you guys I was so tempted to buy crypto for my team. I ended up not doing it because I was like, some people, just thinking about they would cash it out, like they wouldn't want to hold it, and then you got to deal with all the tax implications. So I ended up just getting them gift cards. But I do think if you're still on the fence about crypto, you should get in. So now's the time to do it.
Yeah, very good. NBA. Any thoughts on the NBA?
No, going back to crypto, it's at $47,000 for Bitcoin right now, and Ethereum is down to $3,800.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you very much, everyone. All of us have different work that we got to get to and meetings and all that stuff. So again, playoff time, and let's see how everyone does.
Yeah, good luck.
Talk soon, everyone.